Hey, welcome to another video from theplayersaid.com. I'm Grant.
And I'm Tim.
Yeah, see, Alexander's here. Yeah,
There we go.
He's going to be walking as we talk to Tim about 3 or 4 of his games that are in process and development.
What's up next at Catastrophe Games?
So what I'm going to do, this is Tim Densham with Catastrophe Games. So we've played several of their games. One of our favorites is Zermatt, which is a fantastic game. Not a traditional war game, but it is literally an interesting experiment on mechanics and trying to model the war there, and we've really enjoyed it. So we wanted to bring to you and provide Tim an opportunity to look at a couple of quick designs.
Sure.
So Tim, maybe tell us about Rule the Waves to start.
Rule the Waves is a card game. Think of kind of like Master and Commander type thing. Very light game, but you're taking
I don't
your
see
ship.
Russell Crowe.
You know, he's there.
He's there, he's just...
I don't know if Alexander can zoom in close enough, but he's there, trust me. But you're taking your ship across a number of journeys through the Caribbean and Europe and across the East Coast of the United States. You're going to run into different events, most of them involving enemy ships. So you're a British commander, so you could be running into French or Spanish or some Dutch. There's also some pirates out there. So all the ships are from the history, but this is kind of more of an arcade version where you're just turning the deck, trying to run into them. You have your quick battle. You manage. Key part to this is managing your ammunition and how well your ship is doing, and whether or not it's time to cut bait and take off and evade, or whether you want to engage. So you'll get more points from engaging, of course, but you need
surviving
to survive.
is better.
Yeah, surviving is still good. Yep.
So I noticed, are these like mission cards where you, because I think there were a couple that I saw when I was looking earlier.
Well, there's not missions, but you choose which
area you go into.
And depending on your ship, the different ships are stronger, like the Britannia is the toughest one out there, but you could run into an enemy flagship. So, and there's a historical mode to it. There's a cooperative mode, so you could have 2 ships, so like a little flotilla. And then there is the competitive mode, so you're each going out there on that, but you're trying to do better than the other guy. So that's basically the
designer is Matt Haywood.
Matt Haywood, he did a Kickstarter for this. I got the game a year or so ago, and it was a lot of fun, but he self-published that, and I said, hey, how about letting us take a shot at this in the United States? So you'll be seeing this very soon on Kickstarter, and it should be a lot lot of fun.
Looks very interesting. How long does it play?
Well, of course, if you get killed right off the bat, it doesn't take very long. Right, it's a 5-minute game. It shouldn't take much more than an hour, even if you're playing all of the successfully going through all the journeys. Okay, nice. And it 2-player game? It could be. It is really designed principally to be solo. But when you do play the 2-player game as cooperative or competitive, it's kind of like you're playing solo together, if that makes sense. Yeah. You know, you're running in through the same ships through the same journey, but you're taking, your opportunities to outscore the other opponent or to help each other get through to the end. Okay. Looks very interesting. Yes, yes. Got some historical setting there too. And there's a historical mode where, like, if you're going to go into the Caribbean, you're going to run into the Spanish and the Dutch, because that's their islands that are closest to that. Yeah. And then the Lesser Antilles, now you're going to run into the French and the Dutch. And so anyhow, as you look through there, you can set that up. And so that also when you go to Europe, you're not going to run into all the pirates of the Caribbean. So that's nice. That's a way to make it a bit more historical. And when did you say the Kickstarter for this? Oh, it's probably going to come soon, next month or so. Okay. I'd imagine. So look out for that. So this will be next on deck. Cool. Literally, that's a pun intended. Literally, that's next on deck. Well, let's move on to Solder City. All right, so Solder City is the follow-up to Zermatt. And so what this game is, this takes the same system, but instead of out there in the wilderness of Afghanistan, this is Solder City, which is a suburb of Baghdad. So this campaign started right after the invasion, so say 2004 till about 2008. So it's not like a year long like Zermatt was, but it plays the same way, and you're trying to go back and forth. Since it's always going to be a grid, you have a home row on both sides that's worth more points to the other side if they control it at the end. In addition to that, there's also, since we're not out in the sticks of Afghanistan, you're in a capital city of an advanced country, you have the media. So doing things to push the media around, that's victory points at the end as well. So you have the same kind of problems. You also have the media, and you can also build 2 more types of buildings. You can build your own media center, and you can also go and build a recruiting center to help recruit more troops. So it's probably like I'd call it like an advanced version of Zermatt. Not that much more, but there's more nuances to this one than Zermatt.
One of my favorite things about Zermatt is having to prioritize your orders and what you do and how you do it and how you have to pay for that. You can't do everything you want to do all the time.
That's right.
This replicates that command and control.
This is still there. Another change here is it's going to be at least 7 turns, but you don't know when it's going to end because some of the cards you can play are truces, and there's also that in the event deck. So truces are powerful cards, so you've got the impetus to play that, but you have to be careful. You definitely don't want to play a truce if you're behind, because that's going to really hurt your chances of getting.
But conversely, if you're ahead,
you want to just get that done as fast as you can, and hope it works, because sometimes it doesn't.
Okay, I love the art.
Yes.
Who's your artist on this one?
That's Patrick Gomez. He was the one. We used him as the artist for Stonewall. He did the man art.
Nice.
So it's a dark art, and it looks like that here, but he's worked out so well, we've actually hired him on as our Catastrophe Games artist.
Nice.
So we're quite happy with his work.
Very striking cover, for sure. And Zermatt was amazing as well. It had more traditional
That was my daughter who did that one. Dominic Senkovic, who did the art for the tiles for both games, and just knocked it out of the park. So,
how many extra tiles? Is it laid out like this every time the same? It's not, right?
No,
I remember you added more tiles, if I remember correctly.
I've got 5 more tiles, 4 or 5 more tiles. So yes, it will never be the same game with that. And you still have the same problems of trying to use the roads, although the roads only apply to the Americans. The Iraqis know how to get through
the back alleys.
The Americans are stuck with their vehicles, so they have to move that way.
So what's the timeline on this one?
Probably this summer for a Kickstarter, I imagine. I have to negotiate with Steve at Blue Panther to figure out when the big printing is going to be, but I'm thinking that's probably more likely when that's going to happen. Okay.
And then fulfill maybe by the end of the year? Fingers crossed? Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's move on to your next game here.
So now they're going to get cruder. So I'm just going to tell you that right now.
They're prototypes.
That's right. So Fog of War is kind of a thing for us at Catastrophe Games. So this is Division Command in World War II, Eastern Front, and what we've got here on this scenario, it's Day 2 Barbarossa. So the Germans are attacking, the Russians are defending. But what this tries to do, the game is called True Command, and what it tries to replicate for the players is you're not out there with 100 million pieces out there. You have your subordinate brigade and regimental commanders, and that's who you really are giving orders to. So that's who, and these blocks, that's what these are representing. You have scouts out there, so there's quite a bit of fog of war, maneuvering. But the game begins with, the first opportunity for fog of war is you don't even know what your order of battle is. So you draw one of the 3 mission types, and then you look that up there to find out what your order of battle is and what your mission is. Okay. So if you've got more capability, then there's a higher expectation for you. So you could be take all the bridges and the town, or it might be you get a very small order of battle, lesser units.
So lesser objective.
All you have to do is hold one bridge.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and the other guy's got the same thing. So you may go mid-game before you realize what you're up against and what the other guy's objectives are.
So what are you tracking up there with the different dice and the charts up here above the game?
This is when you do make contact, and say we have 2 units that go up against each other, then what happens is then you're going to look back here. and this is a B. Then you find out you've assigned a commander, and the more dots here, the better the commander is. And this is up to this commander. And this is firepower, this is movement, so nothing earth-shattering there. So if this is my Russian commander, I have 2 firepower, and I have a commander die that I use. The Germans are going to look the same because they have 2 firepower and a commander, but their commander is better. So they get a choice from these dice of what they want to do. There's the assault dice where you really want to destroy the enemy. Maneuver, where you really want to control the hex. There's protection, where you're maneuvering so you don't take losses. The fire support, which is like a jack of all trades. And if you're defending on terrain, you get to use the terrain die. So then as the commander for a good unit, I get to choose 1 die. If I have a really good commander, I get to use 2 extra dice of my choice to impact how the fight goes. So that is a way to have, especially in this time where the Russian armor, the T-34s and KV-1s just completely outclassed everything the Germans had. But even though their equipment was better, the Germans had a lot more experience and a lot better commanders, so they get to use better dice.
Okay.
If, as you're taking your turns, like I said, I really like the fog of war. So you don't get to figure out what your turn order is going to be. You're just going to pull from a bag, and that's how the order is going to be. You don't know how long the turn is going to last because there are some end turn things. So it could be a short one, it could be a long turn. And so there's some chaos there trying to figure out which way that's going to go. If you decide you've used up your units, or like many times in this, the Russians aren't sure what the Germans are going to do, they can, instead of moving units, they can go and pull on their staff. So as a division commander, you have a staff that works for you. So you could draw from here instead, and you're going to have your intelligence officer, your logistics officer, you could have your plans officer, your operations officer, and your personnel. So it's real simple, like a personnel gets you a hit point back.
Okay.
The log guy lets you move again.
Okay.
The G2, the intelligence guy, brings your scout back into the fight. But these bags are not the same, because although they have the same staff officers, the staffs were quite different. Like the Germans were much more proficient by this stage, and the Russians weren't. So the Russians are filled with friction.
Okay.
So they can pull out there and get a friction, and it does nothing.
Okay.
And it does nothing again and nothing again until the bag resets when you pull out the executive officer, and that gives you a chance to, that's like a joker to do any of the functions, but then it resets everything, goes in there. There's only 2 friction in the German deck.
Got it.
So it really shows the difference between the experience and ability of both sides fighting this fight.
Are these dice going to be custom dice, or are they just 6-siders, different colors to differentiate?
Let's just say I learned my lesson
at
Zermatt, which was expensive dice.
Sure.
But
they're very cool, though.
They are very cool. But if you look at the numbers of dice that we're using right here, this would be prohibitive, unfortunately, for me.
Makes sense.
If printing in the United States, I have to make some decisions there. So this number of dice are going to be just colored 6-sided dice.
And I think a lot of times people who buy war games, they don't understand that side of it, right? They see bigger war game publishers that can leverage maybe a custom, because they have 1,000 units.
Oh, yes.
You're going to do a couple hundred units, maybe 300 or 400, and it's harder to get those prices.
I'm quite jealous of them.
I
look at those and
yeah.
Someday.
Right.
Someday.
Right. Well, if you keep making quality games, to me, those things will take care of themselves in the end.
That is the plan.
So True Command. Looks very cool. What's the plan on this one?
Well, I've been working on this for longer than any other game that I've had. So I've had probably 5 or 6 years I've been working on this. But I think the engine is basically done for this.
Okay.
So with that done, I mean, I have played 5 or 6 years. I've been playing the same initial scenario.
Okay.
So I am ready to move on from that to like scenario 2 and 3 and 4.
Okay.
Ultimately, what I'd like to do is have different maps to show the different eras, and eventually with the number of games, show what it was like across the the whole war on this particular Eastern Front to show like, okay, now the Russians are getting better, but so is the German equipment. And get to the point where towards the end, they had their pluses and minuses still, but it wasn't the mismatch that this initial started, right. So it'd just be very interesting to see how that plays out. So that's what's next.
With this being on the East Front, would you see something like this maybe on the West Front?
Oh, sure.
Okay,
if that works out well, there's the West Front, there's Italy.
Mediterranean, North Africa.
There's the Pacific, there's Korea. I mean, the system is pretty broad.
Okay.
So I don't think it would be too terribly difficult to change maps, change the counters, change things around to apply to a lot of modern situations that have this.
Awesome.
They'll fight this way.
So lots of interesting content to look forward to in the future on this.
Hopefully, yes, sir.
All right. Well, your last game.
Okay. So again, the least polished here, but this game is the next iteration of the game that Rob and David came out with, Judean Hammer. This is a team, Tim, Urin, and Nick in England, and what they've come up with is they've got the making of Saudi Arabia. And this is a point of history I had no idea about. But
so setting is 1800s?
This is like the 1900s through just past the end of World War I.
Okay.
So in fact, that's the 3 decades: pre-war, Great War, post-war.
Got it.
What this offers, what's really interesting to me about this is not only is it a different map and different setting, but they built this so it's 3-player. So you can play 2-player or 3-player. So it's 3 different factions fighting it out. In addition to that, there's NPC factions. So starting off the game, the Ottoman Turks are out there across the board, and you can use them as to your advantage and as you're working the game, or you can attack them to try to take control of that directly. As the Great War era comes out, then the British units start coming into play. And then, of course, after World War I, there's no more Ottoman Empire, so all those, if there's any left, they go away because their time has passed. So it's some interesting, not only is it a 3-way, but you can kind of manipulate the imperial powers as well.
So similar combat system?
Yes.
Okay, so each side's asymmetric?
Yes.
Has a different way of attacking?
So since there's 5 actual fighting factions on here, now we've had to change that to the 5 different faction colors. So there'll be the 3 playing races here, the 3 playing factions, and then you have the NPC factions. You have the Ottomans and you have the British. What's interesting, one of the interesting dynamics on here is the difference between here for the player factions isn't much, just like Judean Hammer, 1 or 2. But sometimes if you attack the Imperials and they're on their game, they're very hard.
Right.
So they can smack you down pretty easily.
That's why things like ambush and hit and run and that was one of the things I liked about Judean Hammer was one side was a little more powerful, the Ottomans, I think in that one, correct?
The Greeks and the Maccabees.
Yep.
That was the Maccabees start off fairly weak but centralized, but they can live off the land.
Yep, spread out
and the Greeks always had to maintain their lines of supply.
Yeah.
And that made that a very interesting game. There's still line of supply here, but it's much more chaotic with everybody kind of mixed in. They have their areas that are stronger, but you have to look 3 different directions here. So it's really changes the game quite a bit.
So what's the schedule on this one, you think?
Well, because you can look at the deck of cards here. We've got a lot. I think those guys have really done a great job. They made a playable engine right off the bat.
Okay.
So I feel super confident about that. I just want a chance to play test this a bit more.
Right.
And make sure there's no weird discrepancies here where if I play this, I win.
Yeah.
I don't want that. So I just want a little bit more time. So I'd imagine probably early next year, I'm guessing, as a Kickstarter.
Okay.
So
2024.
Probably. Yep.
Good. Well, it looks
Unless
like
I can get it done faster.
Sure.
Then
but don't rush. I think everybody would appreciate a well play-tested, well run-through game that is, competitive. Yep. So and every game we've played of yours have been very enjoyable, interesting and very balanced.
And I'm just disappointed that I couldn't quite get the prototype done, because you're looking at my terrible scratched up cover here.
Sure.
Ilya just made a beautiful looking box, map, cards, everything looks gorgeous. And unfortunately, that happened last week. So
okay,
no
got
time to print it out.
Makes sense. Well, cool. Well, Tim, I want to thank you for your time and your efforts. I know you're a veteran. Thank you for your service.
Thank you,
I think it's very cool that you've come back, put some of your real world knowledge and experience into war games. What's the old saying? You won it from the horse's mouth.
Sure.
You've been, obviously not here, but you've been in some of these other places, and once again, very interesting take on subjects, and we appreciate it. We think Catastrophe is a great little company.
Well, I appreciate it.
One day, a great big company.
There we go. That's the goal.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. Well, I appreciate your time. Once again, Tim Densham from Catastrophe Games. Mm-hmm. I've been Grant for the Player's Aid, and Alexander's behind the camera. So
great job,
you.
Alexander.